Good day everyone, I am Fatima Mayrinya and I am here to discuss about case analysis and how to conduct a case analysis. To start, a strategic management case is a detailed description of a challenging situation faced by an organization. It usually includes a chronology of events and extensive support of materials such as financial statements, product lists, and transcripts of interviews with employees. Although names or locations are sometimes changed to provide anonymity, cases usually report facts of a situation as authentically as possible. A case study analysis requires you to investigate a business problem, examine the alternative solutions, and propose the most effective solutions using supporting details. They are descriptive and exploratory analysis based on an in-depth investigation of a single individual, group, or event to explore the causes of an underlying principles. One of the main reasons to analyze strategic management cases is to develop an ability to evaluate business situations critically. Memorizing key terms and conceptual framework is not enough. To analyze a case, it is important that you go beyond a textbook prescriptions and quick answers. It requires you to look deeply information that is provided and root out the essential issues and causes of a company's problems. The type of skills that are required to prepare an effective strategic case analysis can benefit you in an actual business situation. Case analysis adds to the overall learning experience by helping you acquire or improve skills that may not be taught in a typical lecture course. And there are 3 capabilities that can be learned by conducting a case analysis: the ability to differentiate, speculate, and to integrate. The first one is to differentiate. When analyzing cases, it is important to isolate critical facts, evaluate whether assumptions are useful or faulty, and distinguish between good and bad information. Differentiating between the factors that are influencing the situation presented by a case is necessary for making a good analysis. Strategic management also involves understanding that problems are often complex and multi-layered. Ask whether the case deals with operational, business level, or corporate issues. Do the problems stem from weakness in the internal value chain or threats in the external environment? A strategic manager has to dig deep. Being too quick to accept the easiest or least controversial answer will usually fail to get to the heart of the problem. The next one is to speculate. Strategic managers need to be able to use their imaginations to envision an explanation or solution that might not readily be apparent. Being able to imagine different scenarios or contemplate the outcome of a decision can aid the analysis. Managers also have to deal with uncertainty since most of the decisions are made without complete knowledge of the circumstances. Case materials often seem to be missing data or the information provided is contradictory. The ability to speculate about the details that are unknown or the consequences of an action can be helpful. The next ability is to integrate. Strategy involves looking at the big picture and having an organization-wide perspectives. A strategic manager needs to comprehend how all the factors that influence the organization will interact. Changes made in one part of an organization affects the other parts. Thus, holistic perspective that integrates the impact of various decisions and environmental influences on all parts of the organization is needed. Case analysis takes the student through the whole cycle of an activity that a manager would face. Beyond the textbook descriptions of concepts and examples, case analysis asks you to walk a mile in the shoes of a strategic decision maker and learn to evaluate the situations critically. Now, let us proceed on how to conduct a case analysis. The process of analyzing strategic management cases involves several steps. Before beginning, there are 2 things to keep in mind that will clarify the understanding of the process and make the results of the process more meaningful. First, unless you prepare for a case discussion, there is a little you gain from the discussion and even less that you can offer. meaning effective strategic managers don't enter into the problem-solving situations without doing some homework, investigating the situation, analyzing, researching possible solutions, and sometimes gathering the advice of others. Good problem solving often requires the decision makers to be immersed in the facts, options, and implications surrounding the problems. This means that reading and thoroughly comprehending the case materials before trying to make an analysis. The second point to get the most of the case analysis is to put yourself in the shoes like an actual participant. And there are several positions that you can take. They are the strategic decision makers, board of directors, and the outside consultants. Strategic decision makers. This is the position of the senior executive responsible for resolving the situation described in the case. It may be the CEO, the business owner, or the strategic manager in a key executive position. Strategic decision makers manage organizations from the top. Failure to fulfill their responsibilities results in poor overall management of an organization and its eventful demise. The next one is Board of Directors. Since the Board of Directors represents the owner of a corporation, it has the responsibility to step in when a management crisis threatens the company. As a board member, you may be in a unique position to solve the problems. The board's role in a strategic planning entails identifying priorities, establishing goals and objectives, finding resources, and allocating funds to support the decisions that need to be made around strategic planning. The board is also responsible for monitoring the execution of the strategic plan. The last one is outside consultant. Either the board or top management may decide to bring in outsiders. Consultants often have an advantage since they can look at the situations objectively, but they may also be a disadvantage since they have no power to enforce change. Because consultants often work with many different companies and may have worked through these situations or problems in the past with someone else, they can really provide a perspective based on what they have seen work or not. And given this experience, they can often bring new and innovative ideas or possible changes to the table that clients probably wouldn't have been able to see on their own. Before beginning the analysis, it may be helpful to envision yourself assuming one of these roles. Then as you study and analyze the case materials, you can make a diagnosis and recommend solutions in a way that is consistent with the role that you played. Try different perspectives. You may find that your view on the situation may change based on what role you had played. The idea of assuming a particular role is similar to the real world in various ways. In your career, you may work in an organization where outside consultants, bankers, lawyers, or other professionals advising you about how to resolve business situations or improve your practices. Their perspectives will be different from yours, but it is useful to understand things from a different point of view. And remember, case analysis can help you develop an ability to appreciate such multiple perspectives. That's all for today's discussion about case analysis and how to conduct case analysis. Have a good day!
So good day everyone. My name is Romela Angeline Iroman from BSBA HRM 23B. So in light of discussion about strategic management cases, I will now discuss two of the steps on how to conduct a case analysis. In conducting a case analysis, you have to first become familiar with the material. So it means that you must become familiar with its content. So basically, you have to know more about the content of your case because as we all know, written cases often include a lot of reading materials. So read the case several times to become familiar with the information it contains. Next, it is an essential step to understand a case and its implications. So basically, you have to pay attention to the information in any accompanying exhibits, tables, or figures, because many case scenarios, as in real life, present a great deal of detailed information. Some of these facts are more relevant than others for problem identification. One can assume the facts and figures in the case are true, but statements, judgments, or decisions made by individuals should be always questioned. Underline and then list the most important facts and figures that would help you define the central problem or the issue. If key facts and numbers are not available, you can make assumptions. But these assumptions should be reasonable given the situation, because at what is written here, the correctness of your conclusions may depend on the assumptions you make. Now, when you approach a strategic case, try the following techniques to enhance comprehension. First, read quickly through the case one time to get an overall sense of the material. So skim the case to get an overview of the situation it presents. This quick overview should give you the general flavor of the situation and indicate the kinds of issues and problems that you will need to wrestle with. If you are provided with materials related to the case, it is best to have time to read them. Second, use the initial read-through to assess possible links to strategic concepts. You need to understand the strategic concepts here and find a possible link to the strategic management case. So it will be relevant to see the connections of those you have read from the materials to the strategic concepts. Next, read through the case again, and this time in depth. So make written notes as you read. Read again the case thoroughly to digest the facts and circumstances. In this reading, try to gain full command of the situation it presented in the case. So start forming your own picture of the overall situation being described. So as you read again, start to write down information that will help you go through with the case. Also, expect that information in the case exhibits are crucial enough to materially affect your diagnosis of the situation. Next, evaluate how strategic concepts might inform key decisions or suggest alternative solutions. So here, an evaluation of strategic concepts should be done to know the process by which it will bring you to your key decisions or alternative solutions. And lastly, after formulating an initial recommendation, thumb through the case again quickly to help assess the consequences of the actions you propose. So if you have done the previous techniques properly, this should be straightforward. Here, you will determine the possible consequences of your proposed actions. This will be important to select an alternative solutions. You can conduct an assessment by listing the advantages and disadvantages or the pros and cons of each alternative, and then discussing the short and long-term implications of choosing each. So after becoming familiar with the material, the next one is to identify the problem. So here, we determine what the problems are to identify reasonable solutions. So we use the facts provided by the case to identify the key issues. Many cases present multiple issues or problems. So we need to identify the most important and separate them from more trivial ones. So next, this is one of your most important tasks in conducting a case analysis. Identifying the problem is a crucial step because we cannot find a solution unless we know the problem. In other words, once you have determined what the problem is, you are well on your way to identifying a reasonable solution. Remember that the recommendation of possible and accurate solutions will depend on it later on. So let us proceed. Now, let us talk about important things to remember in identifying the problems. So first, some cases have more than one problem. In some circumstances, we should always determine if there are more than one problem, because as what I have said, some cases do not have only one problem, although most of the time, the problems are usually related. For a hypothetical example, consider the following. Company A was losing customers to a new competitor. Upon analysis, it was determined that the competitor had a 50% faster delivery time, even though its product was of lower quality. The managers of Company A could not understand why would the customers settle for an inferior product. So it turns out that Company A's marketing strategy was not enough to convince the people that their product was of good quality than their competitor. Thus, there were two related problems. First, inferior delivery technology, and next, insufficient sales effort. So next, when trying to determine the problem, avoid getting hung up on the symptoms. So when you're resolving a problem, it is important to understand the difference between a problem and a symptom. So basically, a symptom is an indicator or a sign that a problem exists. So let us go back to the example given earlier. So as what has been stated, Company A was losing customers to a new competitor. So upon analysis, it was determined that the competitor had a 50% faster delivery time, even though its product was of lower quality. Then the managers of Company A couldn't understand why would a customer settle for an inferior product. So it turns out that Company A's marketing strategy was not enough to convince the people that their product was of good quality than their competitor. So now, as you can see, the symptom was losing customers. But remember that it doesn't happen by itself. There might be reason behind it, and it might be the main problem. So upon looking at it, the underlying problems might be the company's outdated delivery technology and insufficient sales effort. So here, you must address the main problem, not a related symptom. So let us proceed. Third, you need to articulate the problem. So it can be hard to put your finger on what the problem is. Hence, before a strategy can be explored, a clear articulation of the problem has to happen. Writing down a problem statement gives you a reference point to turn to as you proceed through the case analysis. This is important because the process of formulating strategies or evaluating implementation methods may lead you away from the initial problem. So make sure your recommendation actually addresses the problems you have identified. And the last one, sometimes problems are not apparent until you do the analysis. In some cases, the problem will be presented plain, perhaps in the opening paragraph or on the last page of the case. But in other cases, the problems are not readily understood or perceived. Hence, we need to do a thorough analysis for us to determine the problems in the strategic cases. So before we finally end, let us have a very quick recap. So the two of the several steps to conduct case analysis that I have discussed are the following. First, to become familiar with the material. Second, to identify the problem or the problems. So the other steps will be discussed by the next reporter. So that would be all for my presentation. I hope you have learned something from me today. Thank you for listening and have a good day.
Good afternoon. I am Dana Perez from BSBA HRM 23, and I will be discussing about conducting strategic analysis and proposing alternative solutions. Okay, first of all, why do you think conducting strategic analysis important? Well, basically, it is important because the purpose of a strategic analysis is to analyze an organization's external and internal environment, assess current strategies, and generate and evaluate the most successful strategic alternatives. The first step is to determine which strategic issues are involved. You should take considerations of these questions when you are analyzing a company issue. Is there a problem in the company's competitive environment, or is it an internal problem? If it is an internal problem, does it have to do with the organizational structure, strategic controls, uses of technology, or perhaps the company has overworked its employees or underutilized its intellectual capital? Has the company mishandled a merger, chosen the wrong diversification strategy, botched a new product introduction? Well, you should always consider these questions because surely each of these issues is linked to one or more of the concepts discussed earlier in the text. Okay? Next is to determine what strategic issues are associated with the problems you have identified. Remember also that the most real-life case situations involve issues that are highly interrelated. Even in cases where there is only one major problem, the strategic processes required to solve it may involve several parts of the organization. Once you have identified the issues that apply to the case, it is now then that you conduct the analysis. For example, you may need to conduct a five forces analysis or dissect the company's competitive strategy. Perhaps you need to evaluate whether its resources are rare, difficult to find, difficult to substitute, it is valuable, or difficult to imitate. Financial analysis may be needed as well to assess the company's economic prospects. Perhaps the international entry mode needs to be reevaluated because of changing conditions in host country. Employee empowerment techniques may need to be improved to enhance organizational learning. Whatever the case, it is important that all the strategic concepts introduced in the text include insights for assessing their effectiveness. Determining how well a company is doing these things is central to the case analysis process. Here is an example of a summary of financial ratio analysis techniques. So in this part of the overall strategic analysis process, it is also important to test your own assumptions about the case. First, what assumptions are you making about the case materials? It may be that you have interpreted the case differently than your team members or classmates, so being clear about these assumptions will be important in determining how to analyze the case very well. Second, what assumptions have you made about the best way to resolve the problems? You should always ask yourself why you have chosen these type of analysis over the other. This process of assumption checking can also help determine if you have gotten to the heart of the problem or are still just dealing with the symptoms. Moving on to the next part of our discussion is proposing or propose alternative solutions. It is important to remember that in strategic management case analysis, there is rarely one right answer or one best way. Even when members of a class or a team agree on what the problem is, they may not agree upon how to solve the problem. Therefore, it is helpful to consider several different solutions. After conducting strategic analysis and identifying the problem, you have to develop a list of options. What are the possible solutions? What are the alternatives? Then first, generate a list of all the options you can think of without prejudging any of them. Remember that not all cases call for dramatic changes or dramatic decisions. Some companies just need to make small adjustments, and in fact, do nothing may be a reasonable alternative in some cases. Although that is rare, it might be useful to consider what will happen if company does nothing. So this point, it illustrates the purpose of developing alternatives to evaluate what will happen if a company chooses one solution over the other. Thus, during this step of a case analysis, you will evaluate choices and the implications of those choices. One aspect of any business that is likely to be highlighted in this part of the analysis is strategy implementation. Ask how the choices made will be implemented. It may be that what seems like an obvious choice for solving a problem creates an even bigger problem when implemented. But you have to remember also that no strategy or strategic fix is going to work if it cannot be implemented. So once a list of alternatives is generated, then we have to move on to the next slide and ask these questions for yourself. Okay, first, can the company afford it? How will it affect the bottom line? Second, is the solution likely to evoke a competitive response? Will employees throughout the company accept the changes? And then what impact will the solution have on morale? Fourth, how will the decisions affect other stakeholders? Will customers, suppliers, and others buy into it? Fifth, how does this solution fit with the company's vision, mission, and objectives? So it's very important. And for the last one, will the culture or values of the company may be changed by the solution? Is it a positive change? The point of this step in the case analysis process is to find the solution that both solves the problem and is realistic. A consideration of the implications of various alternative solutions will generally lead you to a final recommendation that is more thoughtful and complete.
Good day, everyone. For the continuation of the steps on how to conduct a case analysis, the fifth step is we make recommendations. The basic aim of case analysis is to find solutions and come up to sets of recommendations on what should the company do and what course of action is needed to be done in order to address the problem. You need to choose which of the alternative solutions should be adopted and briefly justify your choice by explaining how it would solve your problem. The recommendation should also focus on how would this course of action be properly implemented and what will be the result or consequences to the firm if they consider doing it. Make a logical argument that shows how the problem led to the analysis and the analysis led to the recommendations you are proposing. Case analysis can be a very rewarding process, but it can also be frustrating and challenging because you have to make sure that the solutions you have in mind must resolve the issues or problems you identified. Students often ask to prepare oral presentation of the case and their analysis of the best remedies. So here are the tips for preparing an oral case presentation. First rule is organize your thoughts. This includes brainstorming with your team. You must be familiar with the subject and do some research and share your insights or your take on the case, then list it down. And make an outline to organize your content of the case. The second rule is emphasize strategic analysis. Keep in mind that the purpose of case analysis is to identify problems and find solutions for each. For it to become easier to analyze, you may need to reconstruct or restate the case in order to see if there's something you may need to focus into. There are three major categories. These are, the first one is background or the problem statement, followed by strategic analysis or options, and the last is recommendation or action plan. The emphasis of the presentation should be on the analysis of the case, which was discussed by the previous reporter. Next rule is be logical and consistent. Present your arguments and explanations in a logical sequence. This would promote good discussion and avoid confusion on the side of the listeners. Support your claims with facts and be sure that the solutions you propose will address the problems you diagnosed. The next one is defend your position. An oral presentation is usually followed by a class discussion. Be prepared of what others might disagree with, and it is recommended that before the presentation, your team must criticize your work to see if there's any loopholes and be ready to defend it. Lastly, share presentation responsibilities. Strategic management case analysis are often conducted by teams. Each member should have a certain role in an oral case presentation. It is essential to be knowledgeable with each part of the case, not just the part assigned to you. So in the time of case presentation, you are able to answer questions that would possibly arise. How to get the most from case analysis. Here are the tips to go beyond the concept and seek insights from your own reservoir of knowledge. First is you have to keep an open mind. Case analysis discussion often evokes variety of strong opinions and emotions. As a presenter, it is essential to have an open mind to prevent being emotional towards other person's opinion against your stand. Also, it allows you to process what the other person have said that may contribute to your case. Next is take a stand from what you believe. It is true that keeping an open mind is vital, but it is also important to stand with what you believe. Take note that you don't need to conform with what your teacher or your classmates are expecting to hear from you. Analyze the case from your own point of view that are influenced by your belief system and background. When they notice that the presenter have a strong stand, it encourages the listeners to become curious on what compels the presenter to believe on what she is asserting. It might encourage thorough investigation that would lead to a meaningful discussion. Next is draw from your personal experience. They say that experience is the best teacher. There may be some instances that you have previously experienced the problems in the case and been able to resolve it. Of course, we need to apply analytical tools for case analysis, but we cannot deny that these personal experiences can be a great way to start.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Camila Marie Susito, and I will continue to report about how to get the most from a case analysis.
Number 4 is participate and persuade. People that are persuasive and speak their mind can often influence the views of others. But to do so, you need to be very confident, well prepared, and convincing. Because being persuasive is more than being loud or long winded. Persuasive people establish their ideas assertively and confidently without being aggressive and pushy. You should also be able to communicate other ideas quickly and clearly. It also involves understanding of all sides of an argument and being able to overcome objections to your own point of view. These efforts can make a discussion livelier, and it also parallel what happens in real world. In business, people frequently share their opinion and attempt to persuade others to see things in their way. Number 5, be concise and to the point. At the heart of business is the idea that time is money. This may lead you to believe that shorter messages are always better. However, being concise is not just fast or short. Sometimes, you need to balance the clarity of the message with the efficiency. You must be clear about your ideas, make your arguments in a way that is explicit and direct. Do not try to make a lot of points once by jumping around between topics. Avoid trying to explain the whole case situations at once. The best way to do it is to be specific and stay focused. Number 6, thinking outside of the box. Thinking outside of the box simply means that you are willing to consider different methods and solutions for you to be able to reach your goals. It is equally important to be imaginative and creative when making a recommendation and determining how to implement a solution. The reason is that managing strategically requires more than memorizing a concept. Strategic management insights must be applied to each case differently. Out of the box thinking will help you to apply different strategic knowledge in most novel and unique ways. Number 7, learn insights from others. Before you make up your mind about a case, make sure that you hear what others want to say. Get a second opinion, a third opinion, and so forth. In a case discussion, observe how your classmates or your teammates attack an issue and how they will provide a solution for it. Such observation skills may be a key for you to find other answers to your problems. Number 8, apply insights from other case analysis. The aim has been to show you how business firms think about and deal with these business problems. If you will conduct several case analysis, you will know how the concept from a text apply to the real-life business situation. Incorporate the insights that you learned from the previous case analysis and apply this to each new case that you will analyze. Number 9, critically analyze your own performance. Performance appraisals are a standard part of any workplace situations. This can determine promotions, raises, and work assignments. The same can be applied to your performance in a case discussion. You can ask yourself, were my comments insightful? Did I make a good contribution? How might I improve next time? You can use the same criteria in yourself that you use to evaluate others. This technique not only will make you more fair in your assessment of others, but also will indicate how your own performance can improve. And last, conduct outside research. You can enhance your understanding of a case situation by examining or investigating sources outside the case materials. For example, you may want to study an industry more closely or research a company's close competitors. The company itself may provide useful information on its website or on its annual reports. Such information can enrich the case analysis. Next is guidelines in preparing a written case analysis. Number 1, be thorough. The most important part of analyzing cases is not what strategies you recommend, but rather how you support your decisions and how you propose that they may be implemented. There is no single best solution or one right answer to a case, so make sure that you give ample justification for your recommendation. Number 2, coordinate team efforts. Strategy formulations, implementation, and evaluation decisions are commonly made by a group of individuals rather than by a single person, so be sure that you are open-minded to others' opinions and ideas. Number 3, avoid restating the obvious. Failure to use specifics is the major shortcoming of most oral and written case analysis. Stay focused to the key points and restate only the information that is needed to your analysis. Number 4, present information graphically. The aim of case analysis is for you to consider all the facts and relevant information, generate feasible alternative strategies, and choose among those strategies and for you to defend your recommendations. Support your positions with charts, graphs, ratios, and analysis. And last, exercise quality control. When writing a case analysis, avoid using jargons, redundant words, acronyms, abbreviations, and ethnic or racial terms. Use short sentences, short paragraphs, simple words and phrases, and watch your spelling. Arrange issues, ideas, and recommendations from the most important to the least important. Make your written presentation professional as possible.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Noel Joseph C. from BSBA HRM 23D, and my topic is about integrative thinking and asking heretical questions. Now, let's talk about integrative thinking. So, how does a leader make a good strategic decisions in the face of multiple contingencies and diverse opportunities? According to Martin, executives who have a capability known as integrative thinking are among the most effective leaders. So, what is the meaning of integrative thinking? So, integrative thinking is a process by which people reconcile opposing thoughts to identify creative solutions that provide them with more options and new alternatives. In other words, integrative thinking examines a problem as a whole, taking note of the complexities that exist and embrace the tension between opposing ideas to create new alternatives that take advantage of many possible solutions. So there are four stages of integrative thinking and deciding process. These are the salience, causality, architecture, and resolution. So for the first stage, the salience, take stock of what features of the decision you consider relevant and important. At this stage, information and variables are relevant for the decision and have to be considered. When we are modeling, the more variables there are, the more complexity and work is introduced. For this reason, quite a few managers arrive at the wrong decisions as they try to reproduce a simplified model of reality to test their decisions. Their attempt to reduce complexity results in the ignorance of certain information and variables which may be relevant for the problem solving. Integrative thinkers suggest to embrace complexity and consider as many variables as possible. Managers should not limit their job only to inclusion or exclusion of variables, but establish also relevance of those factors salient for their decisions. Relying on their ability to perceive and on their capacity to compare and contrast, they should try to spot and assess salient factors. So for the second stage, the causality, make a mental map of the causal relationships between the features, that is, how the various features are related to one another. At this stage, you should attentively explore causal relationships between salient factors for your decisions and eventual choices. Do not limit your analysis to linear relationships, but extend it to nonlinear causality and multidirectional causal relationships. And you should develop multiple causal models and consider many alternative theories. So for the third stage, the architecture, use the mental map to arrange a sequence of decisions that will lead to a specific outcome. At this phase, you have to decide what is in and what is out. In terms of elements necessary for a decision and their priorities in a timeline, an approach suggested is similar to that one used by painters. Still considering the whole, bring the most relevant parts in the foreground and put the secondary ones in the background. When sequencing, try to avoid breaking problems into sub-problems, as it may mean losing some relevant causal relationships indispensable for the whole problem resolution. For the fourth stage, resolution, make your selection. At this stage, it is very difficult not to be too critical and not to see things as black or white. Many managers that fears complexity try to solve their problems by cutting off parts of them. Integrative thinkers are those who give the appropriate parts of each problem and still remaining focused on the whole. This phase of integrative thinking process requires a higher tolerance for ambiguity and uncertainty. So here is the outline for the four stages of integrative thinking and deciding process. So the first one is the salience, consider more salient factors. The causality, consider both multidirectional and nonlinear causality. And the third one is the architecture. When working on parts, visualize the whole. And the last one is the resolution. Strive for creative resolutions of conflicts. So here we can see a dotted arrows, which means we can go back to the previous stages when something is missing or unclear. An integrative thinking approach enables decision makers to consider situations not as forced trade-offs, either decrease cost or invest more, either satisfy shareholders or please the community, but as a method for synthesizing opposing ideas into a creative solutions. The key is to think in terms of both and rather than either or. Integrative thinking shows us that there's a way to integrate the advantages of one solution without canceling out the advantages of an alternative solution. So let's proceed to the next topic, which is asking heretical questions. But first, let us define what is heretical. Heretical is a holding an opinion at odds with what is generally accepted. In other words, heretical is a weird and unorthodox. So, Andrew Winston introduced the concept of heretical innovation to help address the challenges associated with environmental sustainability in today's world. He describes the need to pursue a deeper level of innovation that challenges long-held beliefs about how things work. Central to addressing these challenges is the need to pose heretical questions, those that challenge conventional wisdom. Typically, they may make us uncomfortable or may seem odd or even impossible, but they often become the means of coming up with major innovations. Heretical questions can address issues that are both small and large. From redesigning a single process or product to rethinking the whole business model, one must not discount the value of the approach in considering small matters. After all, the vast majority of people in a company don't have the mandate to rethink strategy. However, anyone in an organization can ask disruptive questions that profoundly change one aspect of a business. What makes this heretical is how deeply it challenges the conventional wisdom.
Good day, I am Jeremy Usi of BSBA HRM 23D, and I will introduce two approaches to decision making that involves the effective use of conflict in the decision making process. These are the devil's advocacy and the dialectical inquiry. Today, many decisions in organizations are made by groups, teams, or committees, while the word conflict often has a negative connotation. Well, conflict is defined as a serious disagreement or argument, typically a protracted one. But conflict can be very helpful in arriving at better solutions to cases. It can provide an effective means for new insights as well as for rigorously questioning and analyzing assumptions and strategic alternatives. Constructive conflict can be very helpful in that it emphasizes the need of managers to consider other people's perspectives and not simply become a strong advocate for positions that they may prefer. If you don't have constructive conflict, you may only get consensus. When this happens, decisions tend to be based on compromise rather than collaboration. And that might become a flaw in your group decision making process. One constraint on group decision making is the term groupthink. Irving Janis coined the term groupthink, which happens when in-group pressures lead to deterioration in mental efficiency, poor testing of reality, and lax moral judgment. It tends to happen in highly cohesive groups in which the group members' desire for consensus or agreement becomes more important than evaluating problems and solutions realistically. So instead of formulating the best solution, they are only striving for agreement without evaluating the problems thoroughly. An example would be the top executive cabinet, the president and the vice president of a firm who have worked together for many years. They know each other well and think as a cohesive unit rather than as a collection of individuals. Clearly, it is important to understand the potential problems associated with group decision making so that it can benefit the case analysis process. Therefore, let's first look at some of the symptoms of groupthink and suggest ways of preventing it. Most or all group members develop an illusion of invulnerability, which causes them to become overly optimistic and take extreme risks. A belief in the inherent morality of the group. Group members develop an unquestioned belief in the group's inherent morality, inclining the members to ignore ethical or moral consequences for their decisions. Stereotype views of members of opposing groups. Group members develop stereotype views of opposition leaders as too evil to warrant genuine attempts to negotiate or too weak and stupid to counter whatever risky attempts are made to defeat their purposes. The application of pressure to members who express doubts about the group's shared illusions. Group members apply direct pressure on any member who expresses strong arguments against any of the group's stereotypes, illusions, or commitments, making clear that this type of dissent is contrary to what is expected of all loyal members. The practice of self-censorship. Group members censor themselves from any deviations from the apparent group consensus, reflecting each member's inclination to minimize the importance of his or her doubts and counter-arguments. An illusion of unanimity. Group members perceive a shared illusion of unanimity concerning judgments conforming to the majority view. The appointment of mind guards. Some group members appoint themselves to protect the group from adverse information that might shatter their shared complacency about the effectiveness and morality of their decisions. Irving Janis has provided several suggestions for preventing groupthink that can be used as valuable guides in decision making and problem solving. First, leaders must encourage group members to address their concerns and objectives. Next, when higher level managers assign a problem for a group to solve, they should adopt an impartial stance and not mention their preferences. Next, before a group reaches its final decision, the leader should encourage members to discuss their deliberations with trusted associates and then report the perspectives back to the group. Next, the group should invite outside experts. The group should divide into subgroups, meet at various times under different chairpersons, and then get together to resolve differences. Last is, after reaching a preliminary agreement, the group should hold a second chance meeting that provides members a forum to express any remaining concerns and rethink the issue prior to making a final decision. The effective use of conflict can be a means of improving decision making. Both leaders and group members must strive to ensure that it is managed properly and used in a constructive manner. So next, let's tackle the two conflict-inducing techniques. Two conflict-inducing decision-making approaches that have become quite popular are devil's advocacy and dialectical inquiry. Both approaches incorporate conflict into the decision-making process through formalized debate. A group charged with making a decision or solving a problem is divided into subgroups and each will be involved in the analysis and solution. First is the devil's advocacy. Devil's advocacy is a method of introducing conflict into a decision-making process by having a specific individuals or groups act a critic to an analysis or planned solution. That individual or group will act as a devil's advocate. After a planning group has developed alternative solutions to a problem, the plan is given to the assigned devil's advocate with instructions to find fault with it. The devil's advocate tries to come up with problems with the proposed alternatives and suggests reasons why it should not be adopted. So basically, the devil's advocate's role is to create dissonance and it will ensure that the group will come up with the best solution. This procedure helps organizations avoid costly mistakes and decision making by identifying potential pitfalls in advance. Although devil's advocacy can be used as a critiquing technique after alternative solutions to a problem have been developed, it can also be used during the early stages of the decision-making process. For example, during a decision-making session, one member could be assigned the role of devil's advocate, expressing as many objections to each alternative solution to a problem as possible. As one might expect, there can be some potential problems with using the devil's advocate approach. If one's views are constantly criticized, one may become demoralized. So it is a good idea to rotate the job of devil's advocate so that no single person or group develops a strictly negative reputation. Next is the dialectical inquiry. Dialectical inquiry attempts to accomplish the goals of the devil's advocate in a more constructive manner. It is a technique whereby a problem is approached from two alternative points of view. The idea is that out of a critique of the opposing perspectives, a creative synthesis will occur. Organizations that use dialectical inquiry create teams of decision makers. Each team is instructed to generate and evaluate alternative courses of action and then recommend the best one. Then after hearing each team's alternative courses of actions, the teams and the organization's top managers meet together and select the best parts of each plan and synthesize a final plan that provides the best opportunity for success. Dialectical inquiry involves the following steps. First, identify a proposal and the information that was used to derive it. Second, State the underlying assumptions of the proposal. Third, identify a counterplan that is believed to be feasible, politically viable, and generally credible. However, it rests on assumptions that are opposite to the original proposal. Fourth, engage in a debate in which individuals favoring each plan provide their arguments and support. Last, identify a synthesis which hopefully includes the best components of each alternative. There are also some potential downsides associated with dialectical inquiry. It can be quite time consuming and involve a good deal of training. Further, it may result in a series of compromises between the initial proposal and the counterplan. In cases where the original proposal was the best approach, this would be unfortunate. Despite some possible limitations associated with these conflict-inducing decision-making techniques, they have many benefits. Both techniques force debate about underlying assumptions, data, and recommendations between subgroups. Such debate tends to prevent the uncritical acceptance of a plan that may seem to be satisfactory after a cursory analysis. The approach serves to tap the knowledge and perspectives of group members and continues until group members agree on both assumptions and recommended actions. Given that both approaches serve to use conflict rather than minimize or suppressing it, higher quality decisions should result.
In case analysis, this cycle of events can provide a useful framework. First, an analysis of the case in terms of the business environment and current events is needed. To make such an analysis, the case background must be considered. Next, based on that analysis, decisions must be made. This may involve formulating a strategy, choosing between difficult options, moving forward aggressively, or retreating from a bad situation. There are many possible decisions depending on the case situation. Finally, action is required. Once decisions are made and plans are set, the action begins. The recommended action steps and the consequences of implementing these actions are the final stage. First step is analyzing organizational goals and objectives. The vision, mission, and goals of a corporation keep members of the company centered on a shared purpose. They also affect how a company deploys its money, responds to its stakeholders, and matches its long-term goals with its short-term objectives. These aims can also influence how strategies are developed and executed by a business. When exploring issues of goals and objectives, you might ask, has the company developed short-term objectives that are inconsistent with its long-term mission? And is the company being faced with an issue that conflicts with one of its long-standing policies? Second step is analyzing external environment. There are two elements to the market climate: demographic, socio-cultural, political, technological, fiscal, and global factors consist of the general climate. Rivals, suppliers, consumers, and other factors that may directly influence the performance of a business are part of the competitive environment. To recognize opportunities and risks that could have been an effect on results, strategic managers must track the environment. When investigating a firm's external environment, you might ask, does the company follow trends and events in the general environment? And is the company effectively scanning and monitoring the competitive environment? Third step is analyzing internal environment. The internal environment of a company consists of its capital and other skills to add value. Value chain analysis and an analysis methodology focused on capital can be used to define the strengths and weaknesses of an organization and assess how they relate to its competitive advantages. Business performance assessment can also help to allow fair comparisons with rivals. When researching a company's internal analysis, you might ask, does the company know how the various components of its value chain are adding value to the firm? And is the company's financial performance as good as or better than that of its close competitors? fourth step is assessing a firm's intellectual assets. A big resource in today's information economy is human resources. As a result, it is a crucial strategic challenge to attract, grow, and retain talented staff. Other properties are also important, such as patents and trademarks. How businesses use social networks and strategic alliances is to exploit their intellectual assets, and how technology is used to handle intelligence can have a significant impact on the competitive advantage of a company. When analyzing a firm's intellectual assets, you might ask, does the company have underutilized human capital? And is the company missing opportunities to forge strategic alliances? Fifth step is formulating business level strategies. As a framework for overcoming the five competitive forces and creating sustainable competitive advantages, businesses use the competitive techniques of differentiation, concentration, and overall cost of leadership. In some competitive environments, combinations of these strategies can work best. In addition, the life cycle of an industry is a significant contingency that can influence the choice of business level strategies for a company. When assessing business level strategies, you might ask, has the company chosen the correct competitive strategy given its industry, environment, and competitive situation? And does the company use combination strategies effectively? Sixth step is formulating corporate level strategies. Large companies also own and handle company portfolios. Corporate plans deal with methods for creating synergies between these firms. Alternative approaches determining which companies should be added or excluded from a portfolio involve similar and unrelated diversification strategies. By means of mergers, acquisitions, joint ventures, strategic alliances, and internal growth, business can diversify. When analyzing corporate level strategies, you might ask, is the company competing in the right businesses given the opportunities and threats that are present in the environment? And is the corporation managing its portfolios of businesses in a way that creates synergies among the businesses? That's all for my report. Thank you.
Hello everyone, ako yung next and last, probably last reporter of Group 4. We are Group 4 but we are reporting today. Let's go to the PowerPoint. And this is a continuation of Angela's report about the analysis, decision, action cycle in case analysis. So these are just the factors that we need to consider in every case analysis cycles, because it's like a cycle. There's always an analysis, a decision, and action. So these are the things that we need to consider. For 7, formulating international level strategies. Foreign markets provide both opportunities and potential dangers for companies that want to expand globally. So when we are talking about international markets, these are markets that are beyond the local setting of the local businesses. Just like Jollibee, yes, Jollibee has expanded to the what's so-called international market. So that also includes what we call an international level strategy. So that's one of the factors. To decide which entry strategy is most appropriate, companies have to evaluate the trades-off between two factors that firms face when entering foreign markets: cost reduction and local adaptation. First is cost reduction. Why is it such an important consideration? Because most businesses that goes international will meet different environmental costs than what they are used to in the local setting. So for example, if there's a fast food, the raw materials of the food will have a different cost than is what is inherently they have in the local setting. So that's one of the consideration. The other is the local adaptation. In other words, how much the audience from the original local community will get transposed to the international community, which is another consideration because, for example, Jollibee is not that popular overseas, um, just in comparison to local. So that's a good consideration. To achieve competitive advantages, firms will typically choose one of the three strategies: global, multi, domestic, or transnational. So they these are very different. Global is the largest term of all. It means the brand can be found almost all over the globe. Example, Amazon, Apple, yeah, multi-domestic is the second. So it's in multiple countries but not considered globally because it doesn't exist in some. The brand doesn't have influence in some markets. Or transnational, that it has only one or two markets uh, that's that exist in international level. When evaluating international level strategy, you might ask, is the company's entry into an international marketplace threatened by the action of its local competitors? Really important? Wait lang. Woo! Really important. Um, for example, what example that I have given earlier, the Jollibee is not that popular overseas because there's local competition from more popular brands in that particular setting. If so, how can cultural differences be minimized to give the firm a better chance of succeeding? So that is another challenge from going overseas. That there exists what we call cultural difference, and how should we minimize it? That's one of the questions. Next is, has the company made the appropriate choices between cost reduction, local adaptation to foreign markets? So have the firm made the right decisions, or are there any necessary adjustments that can be implemented in order to um, improve the decision that have already been made? If not, how can it adjust strategy to achieve competitive advantage? Next, can the company improve its effectiveness by embracing one international strategy over the other? There are multiple international strategy like we discussed earlier: global, transnational, multi-domestic. If so, how it should choose between global, multi-domestic, or transnational strategy? What factors are needed to be considered?
The Bluetooth device is ready to pair. The Bluetooth device is connected successfully.
What are to be considered? Next, 8. Formulating entrepreneurial strategies. New ventures, add jobs, and create new wealth. Entrepreneurial strategies refers to smaller scale entrepreneurial pursuits. So, for example, if the firm is going into a new industry, that's a form of entrepreneurial strategy that doesn't necessarily have to be international. To do so, they must identify opportunities that will be viable in the marketplace, as well as gather resources and assemble an entrepreneurial team to enact the opportunity. So there has to be a team that will have the proper talent to actually do or pursue the entrepreneurial decision. New entrants often evoke a strong competitive response from incumbent firms in a given marketplace. So new people are always have an edge than existing ones, although existing ones can also have an edge in the marketplace, but usually when something is new, they have something new to offer that is different from existing ones, so that's why they have the advantage. When examining the role of strategic thinking on the success of entrepreneurial ventures and the role of competitive dynamics, you might ask, first, is the company engaged in an ongoing process of opportunity recognition? So, are there what's called missed opportunity or low-hanging fruits that can be um, further pursued to easily accomplish small success? If not, how can it such ability to recognize opportunities can be done with multiple processes, maybe looking at the competition and how they recognize the opportunities and adapting it into your own. Do the entrepreneurs who are launching new ventures have vision, dedication, and drive and a commitment to excellence? So, do the entrepreneurs, the people who are actually are implementing the decisions, do they have the right personality? Do they have the right drive to actually push success? If so, how have this affected the performance and dedication of other employees involved in the venture? Because motivation is contagious. If there's majority of people will have the correct vision and dedication, it's likely that the entire team will eventually manifest those traits and therefore will have a higher likelihood of success. Next is, have a strategic principles been used in the process of developing strategies to pursue the entrepreneurial opportunity. So, are there other strategies that can be used, or are there better ones? Is there something that can be improved? If not, how can the venture apply tools such as the five forces analysis and value chain analysis, which has been discussed earlier in the material, to improve its competitive position and performance? So how can we apply those principles and tools to further improve the pursuit? Next, number 9, achieving effective strategic control. Strategic control enables a firm to implement strategic strategies effectively. Informational controls involve comparing performance to stated goals and scanning, monitoring, and being responsive to the environment. Behavioral controls emerge from companies' culture, reward system, and organizational boundaries. Strategic control is the proper flow of strategy in the business, firm, etc. There are two control: the informational control, which is the goals, and informational related aspects of the strategic control, and the other one is the behavior, or how do the, which is also part of strategy, how do the people in the organization actually behaves, do their behavior align with the goal of the firm, and can they push success based on those behaviors. So it's also a part of strategic control. Next is, when assessing the impact of its strategic control and implementation, you might ask, is the company employing the appropriate informational control systems? So, can we change the informational control system? Is there better? That's one consideration. If not, how can it implement a more interactive approach to enhance learning and minimize response times? Just as with school, it's really good to have an interactive approach because that maximizes the learning. So how can we improve the informational control systems? Next, does the company have a strong and effective culture? If not, what steps can it take to align its values and reward system with its goals and objectives? So, are the behaviors of the employees aligned with the goal or the so-called culture? If not, what are the steps to take in order to change the behavioral culture of the company? As the company implemented control systems that match its strategies, so the control system can actually not match the strategy, both the informational and the behavioral. So there should be a bit of complement, of a synergy between the two. If so, what additional steps can be taken to improve performance? So how do we improve that so-called complement? So how do this control system complement the strategy? How can we improve it? One of the considerations. Number 10, creating effective organizational designs. Organizational designs that align with competitive strategies that can enhance performance. Organizational designs refer to the structure of how the operation of the organization is actually being executed. As companies grow and change, their structures must also evolve to meet new demands. A small company will have a different operational demand than a big company who has a larger audience. Therefore, a bigger company should have a larger structure to accommodate its larger demands. In today's economy, firm boundaries must be flexible and permeable to the facilitate smoother interactions with external parties such as customers, suppliers, and alliance partners. New forms of organizing are becoming more common, meaning that traditional ones are starting to decline because there's so much competition, there's so much many businesses. So organizational design is one of the consideration. Again, next, these are the questions to ask in this one. First, has the company implemented organizational structures that are suited to the type of business it is in? If not, how can it alter design in it ways that enhance its competitiveness? So is the organizational structure actually complements the size of the organization, and if not, what are the adjustments that can be made to accomplish that suitability? Next is the company employing boundaryless organizational designs where it is appropriate? If so, how are senior managers maintaining control of lower level employees? So it has to do with organizational design, but on the culture part. So is there a boundary that is appropriate for senior managers and lower level employees? Another thing to consider. Next, does the company use outsourcing to achieve the best possible results? If not, what criteria should be used to decide which functions can be outsourced? Outsourced, referring to the third parties that are not parts of the organization, and um, it's also a part of organizational structure since they will be performing specific functions. So can when and what functions specifically can be suited to outsourcing. Next, 11, creating a learning organization and an ethical organization. Strong leadership is essential for achieving competitive advantages for obvious reasons. Two leadership roles are especially important. The first is creating a learning organization by harnessing talent and encouraging the development of new knowledge, so facilitating the overall flow of knowledge and strategies and development of the talent that's already in the organization. So the informational part. Second, leaders play a vital role in motivating employees to excellence and inspiring ethical behavior. More on the behavior part. There's pattern of information and behavior. So that's the two roles of the leader. One is to facilitate information, two is to facilitate the behavior. These are the questions. Do company leaders promote excellence as part of the overall culture? Is it the goal? And does it being emphasized enough to be remembered by the employees? If so, how has this influenced the performance of the firm and the individuals in it? So this was more of a mission and vision setting. Next, is the company committed to being a learning organization? If not, what can it do to capitalize on the individual and collective talents of organizational members? So is this company really prioritize its informational aspect enough to utilize the talents of members in the firm, business, etc. Have a company leaders exhibited an ethical attitude in their own behavior? If not, how has their behavior influenced the action of other governments? Because, of course, company leaders should be the role model, and a bad leader usually means a bad member. It's rare that it doesn't happen. And so the company leader should exhibit the ethical attitude that they expect from the employees. Next is number 12, fostering corporate entrepreneurship. Many firms continually seek new growth and opportunities for avenues of strategic renewal. Specifically, when a firm will hit a ceiling at some point, so they would actually need to seek new growing opportunities and avenues, usually through the process of diversification. In some corporations, autonomous work units such as business incubators and new venture groups are used to focus corporate venturing activities. Business incubators and new venture groups. Yes, in other corporate settings, product champions and other firm members provide companies with impetus to new areas. So the members will actually be tasked on taking on these new projects in order to see success into the new areas of the industry or a new area of another industry. Just like Amazon, they're not just focused on e-commerce, but now they have an actual store physical. That's an example of a corporate entrepreneurship of expanding the business. Next is when investigating the impact of entrepreneurship on strategic effectiveness, you might ask, has the company resolved the dilemmas associated with managing innovation? It's so easy to effectively defining the pacing of its innovation efforts. So is there innovation? Is the business continually learning from the mistake and further um, mastering the the operational process, and so how has it impacted the business. Next is how the company develop autonomous work units that have the freedom to bring forth new product ideas. Again, innovation. If so, has it used product champions to implement new venture initiatives? So this talks about the implementation. So if we identify that, is there enough one innovation or not, and what are we going to do about it? Next, lastly, does the company have an entrepreneurial orientation? If not, what engage to encourage entrepreneurial attitudes in the strategic behavior of its organizational members? The members will dictate the success of the projects, and if the company is looking to expand, the members should practice expressing those entrepreneurial attitudes in order to make those projects succeed. So does the member show that, and what we can do to show that if it's not currently present. So that's it. Thank you.